Okay, good evening, everybody. Welcome to another First Wednesdays. My name is Peter Kriva. I'm the CEO and President of the Aquarium, but my real job is to MC First Wednesdays. So tonight we have a speaker. First, I want to acknowledge the supporters of this, Courtyard by Marriott and Steve and Brenda Olson, their foundation that makes this all possible. And tonight we're going to hear, before I tell you a little bit about Shelly, the topic is plastics. And I notice this crowd has got a number of a little bit younger than our normal crowd. So that the normal crowd will all remember the famous line that was given to Dustin Hoffman, which was, "Go into plastics, young man." The younger crowd knows plastics as the bane of the planet. And in fact, plastics are sort of the devil we know and the devil we love, because they made fresh food possible, they helped feed the world, they did so many positive things for us, but now we know that they have risk and downsides, and that's what we're going to hear about today. I'm sure Shelly will talk about this a little, but they're everywhere, and they're everywhere in the ocean, and that's why the work that she does and the Institute does is so important. And so about Shelly Moore, so she's executive director of the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research. No relationship to the founder of that institution, which is Captain Moore. Just a happy coincidence. I've never met you, Captain, but thank you for showing up. I'm told he's a famous Long Beach character. And from the accomplishments of the Moore Institute, it's clear he really is. And so she's been working in water quality, and she works on microplastics, trash, and marine debris, which not as much fun as seals, sea lions, and otters, but maybe a little bit more important to our ocean. Shelly, thank you so much for coming out in an evening and telling us what you've learned. I should say a little bit about the format. She's going to speak for about 35, 40 minutes. We have questions here. There are volunteers that will run up and down, take questions. I'll cut off the questions, and then we adjourn outside for beverages and a really interesting exercise that Adina created for the creative ones out there, a puzzle you can make. Shelly.
All right, thank you for coming out, everyone. I'm excited and also kind of depressed to be talking to you about the topic tonight, but hopefully you'll get a better idea of what we're up against. Can I have the slides? There we go. I'm going to talk a little bit about larger debris, larger trash, and plastics, because without that, we don't necessarily have microplastics. And I'll start off talking about some history and some studies that have been done looking at plastics and trash here in California. And then I'll transition into microplastics and kind of tell you what's up from there. I named this talk the microplastics the little big problem, because it is a big problem, and it's going to become bigger as we go through time. And we're seeing some of the effects right now, and it's just going to get worse. This picture is actually a picture I took about 4 years ago. It's a place in the San Gabriel River, and it's a huge area where stormwater floods into. And I have multiple pictures of this particular tree. And every time I go there, it's different trash and different plastics. And this all breaks down into smaller microplastics. I will say that I took a colleague to this place a few years ago, and the whole area looked like this. It was right after a storm. And he actually likened it to a post-apocalyptic scene. It was pretty bad at that time. What we're facing going forward is basically there is a ton of plastic, and most of that makes it into landfills where it just sits for years and years and years, and it doesn't really go away. Many of the plastic items that we have today take years and years and years, on the magnitude of hundreds of years, to degrade. And most of the stuff we put in our recycle bins actually doesn't necessarily get recycled. About 9% is the estimate of things that actually get recycled. So we all feel good, we're putting stuff in the recycle bin, but it's not necessarily going off and being recycled. And right now we're producing plastics at a rate so great that we can't really deal with the waste that comes from from the plastic products we're using. One of the biggest culprits is single-use plastic foodware. And this is every time you go to a fast food restaurant, you're walking out of there with some sort of container that includes your food and your drinks and whatnot. And we'll talk a little bit about some solutions going forward at the end of the talk, some things you can start doing now to try to reduce some of this stuff. It's really what we find a lot of when we're doing surveys out in the environment is particularly the straws, the cups, and much of that actually does degrade over time and becomes microplastics. Part of the problem too is our mismanagement of waste. We have a ton of waste, plastic waste, and much of it reaches our coastal environment, and we don't manage it very well. We have illegally dumped items, we have littered items, and the U.S. is particularly one of the countries that is particularly bad at managing our waste in this way. An estimate came out a few years ago, basically about how much is making it into our aquatic environments, and it's upwards of 35 metric tons of plastics are making it to our aquatic environments. And we don't see pictures like this necessarily, although I do have some, that tree in the first slide, and a couple of pictures you'll see a little bit later on where we've got a lot of plastic in our area. But a lot of the stuff that goes out into our aquatic environment doesn't necessarily float. Some of it is neutrally buoyant, some of it sinks on the bottom, and we don't see it, but it goes out there. I really believe that we have a huge garbage patch off our coast, that every time we have a first flush, a first rain, things are washed off our highly impervious surfaces and go down into the ocean, and there they last a long time. There's an estimate right now that by 2030, we are going to see a cargo ship's worth of plastic by weight entering into our aquatic environments on a daily basis. That's a huge amount, and it's really hard to comprehend how that is going to get into the environment, how it's going to be dealt with once it's there, and what's going to end up happening to it. We're going to have a legacy that we're going to leave for future generations that isn't going to be so nice. So let me tell you about some of the studies that I've worked on over the years. What we know about debris is that it occurs in a number of different habitats. When we're talking about something like the ocean, we have that debris that washes back up onto the beach. This is actually a picture I took, I believe in the year 2000. We had a really large rainstorm that year, and all the beaches in Long Beach, you can see the convention center in the back, all the beaches in Long Beach looked like this, and they were out in force pushing all this stuff into piles and getting it off the beach as soon as possible. Queensway Bay, close to here, was also inundated with trash during that storm, and it was a sight that I will never, ever forget. Beaches, the shoreline, and I gotta say, this is the biggest screen I've ever had behind me, so I keep looking back, trying to see what's up there, and it just blows me away. So shoreline, we find stuff on the ocean bottom, and we find stuff in the water column. We've done studies to look at all of that, all of those places, and I'll cover a few of those. And we've tried looking at sources, but in many cases, it's hard to tell where they're coming from. We know in many cases it's from runoff, in some cases it's from boating traffic, in some cases it's just littered onto beaches and gets washed offshore. Back in 1998, I really love this study. This is a study we did, and it's the first comprehensive study we did on beaches in Orange County. And this was a really big study at the time because it really gave people an idea of what we were finding on beaches. We had 43 sites in Orange County on the beaches, and we basically walked a 25-yard swath of beach, and we collected everything that we found, placed it in a bag, and took it back to a lab in somebody's house and counted every single thing that we found. And one of the authors on this paper, Martin Carrion, it was a really big person in getting this study done. He did most of the collecting and most of the surveying. So we wanted to know what types of things were out there, and here's what we found. We found that there were a lot of plastics, mostly plastic pieces in the form of hard plastics and foamed plastics. But one of the things we also wanted to do is see if we were missing anything. When you're walking along a beach, most people look for cigarette butts, most people look for larger items. So what we did was we actually took a 5-gallon bucket of sand and we sieved that 5-gallon bucket of sand at every site. And what we did was we found these things called pre-production plastic pellets. You may have heard of them before, nurdles. And we estimated over 100 million of these nurdles on beaches in Orange County. So nurdles are those precursors to actual plastic products. They are typically about 4 to 5 millimeters in diameter. They come in different shapes. They come in different colors. And it's usually based on what types of additives they're using and what the final product is going to be. These get sent off to other locations where they're melted and remolded into different types of items like toys and cups and things like that. And we found them all over beaches in Orange County. The other thing we did was we looked at brands of different items. And so I'm gonna do a little audience participation here. Can anybody, you can just scream it out, guess what the top cigarette product was? Marlboro, yes. Candy's a little bit trickier. Any guesses on candy? Twix, M&M, Skittles. I think I heard it over here somewhere. It was actually Starburst. And I don't see those very much anymore, but if you remember, Starburst they're usually individually wrapped, each piece, so that kind of made sense. How about fast food products? McDonald's. Everybody always guesses McDonald's. If you think about beaches in Orange County, this kind of makes sense because I know of at least one, but it was Jack in the Box. All right. How about beer products? Yeah, it is Budweiser, but a particular Budweiser. Bud Light, yes. All right. How about drink products? We actually had a tie for this, and the tie was between Coke and Pepsi. So I really love giving the results of this particular study over and over again. Part of me is hopeful at some point. It's been 25 years since we did this study. I'd love to do it again and see whether things have improved, they've gotten worse, or they've stayed the same, and look at the same things we looked at before. That study was really big because the state took notice of it. And what they did was they started coming up with policies regarding trash. Of course, we have the local municipality bans on things like bags and even a statewide ban on bags and styrofoam and other things. But in 2016, we had something called a TMDL for trash, total maximum daily load. Basically, what that was they had specific water bodies where they felt the water quality was impaired because of trash, and they put a TMDL on those water bodies. A good example of that is the Los Angeles River, and the goal was zero trash in the Los Angeles River over a certain period of time. Since then, they've put out a statewide trash policy. These are also known as the trash amendments. And with the trash amendments, municipalities have to put in, stormwater agencies have to put in full trash capture devices. Those can be really expensive, so they're actually given an option, a second option too. If they don't want to put in full capture devices, they can put in partial capture devices, and they can also do things like education around trash. They can do street sweeping and other things. But both those methods have to be shown to be equivalent. And so the other important thing to know about the statewide trash policy, the trash amendments, is that it only requires those systems to catch pieces of debris that are larger than 5 millimeters, which totally excludes microplastics. Okay? So given the results of that beach study and finding the nurdles on there, we wanted to look more comprehensively at what we could find for the whole state of California. So the State Water Board in 2009 funded a project where we looked for nurdles on beaches in all of California. We had 30 sites, roughly 30 sites in Central and Northern California, and we had 30 sites in Southern California. And we sent crews out, and they basically looked for those plastic pellets. This diagram shows you kind of how those plastic pellets, what opportunities they have to get into the environment. We have the industrial plant where the nurdles are produced, and from there they are actually sent usually to another factory where they're made into their final product. And it's that transportation of those nurdles to the final destination where it gets remolded that provides the opportunity for these plastic pellets to get lost into the environment. I remember trespassing with Charles Moore, he's in the audience today, one of my colleagues, and we went to one of these plastic pellet places, and it was like snow, colored snow on the ground. It was pretty incredible. So they're getting out into the environment. If you've never seen them at the beach, if you really look for them and can have a search image for them, you can typically find them anywhere in Southern California on the beach. Many times they're a little bit white, sometimes they're colored, but they blend in really well, sometimes with the sand. So for this study, we wanted to see basically how they were distributed in California and how many there were. There was a place where we really needed to focus our efforts to clean them up. All right, so this was kind of our study design. We had those 60 sites. We went to each one of them. We did the rack line, mid-beach, and first barrier, whether it was a cliff or some sort of a sidewalk or whatnot, and we sifted a 5-gallon bucket of sand at each one of those sites. So what were some of the results that we found? We found mostly that these pellets occurred in Southern California, primarily in Los Angeles and Orange County, and we had some in San Diego, we had some in the Bay Area. And we were curious of why that would be. So the State Water Board actually put somebody on discovering where all these plastic pellet manufacturers were. And they came up with a map. And basically, this is what the map looks like. And you can see that most of those plastic manufacturers are in this area where we were finding highest numbers of microplastics. And these are the areas where we went and investigated and found them basically in the yard and getting swept into the storm drains and down the rivers into the ocean and swept back onto the beaches. And so we had some in San Francisco Bay Area and in San Diego as well. The State Water Board was required to come up with a plan for putting some of these folks on the spot. It wasn't a requirement, though. They came up with the Clean Sweep program, and it was just kind of recommendations on how to clean these up. So again, I would love to repeat that study in Orange County to see how the numbers of pellets compare now versus what they were like back then. So let me transition now into microplastics. We've looked at kind of the larger trash that we found in California. There's many more studies I could cite, but we don't have enough time. But this gives you a little bit of an idea of how we started looking at microplastics and started with the nurdles. Let me give you some definitions. We have two basic types of microplastics. We have primary microplastics, and those are the microbeads. Those are the things we would traditionally find in health care products, things like facial scrubs, even toothpaste has had microbeads in them before. And California actually has outlawed the selling of these products in California. So you cannot purchase any products now in California that have microbeads in them. That was as of 2020. Secondary microplastics are those that break down from larger plastics. And that's probably where we get a good portion of our plastics in our environment. And again, traditionally, we've only considered microplastics to be plastic items that are smaller than 5 millimeters. I love this picture because it really, really shows how things go from whole items to smaller pieces. And really how over time you start having things like that toothpaste container break down in the environment. The caps break down in the environment, and they get smaller and smaller and more problematic. When we're talking about pathways that microplastics can take to get into the environment, and particularly the ocean, we've got a number of different pathways. We've got stormwater, which every time we have a major rain event, moves large numbers of microplastics down through our storm drains and into our ocean. The potential for wastewater to actually bring microplastics. As wastewater gets treated, it turns out a lot of those microplastics are removed, but there are still some that get put out into the ocean through the pipes that the treated wastewater is sent through. Atmospheric deposition is a big problem. We're breathing plastic every single day. It's in the air, particularly if you have carpet in your house, curtains in your house, anything that might have synthetic materials. You are likely breathing in microfibers. Rivers and aquatic activities also provide pathways for microplastics into our aquatic environments. I will say, going back to atmospheric deposition, I was at a conference in Denver, Colorado. They have 2 air quality stations at the time. One was in the city of Denver, and they were seeing a ton of microplastics in their samples. The other station they had was in the mountains, away from all kinds of people, all kinds of communities and large populations, and they were finding microplastics there as well. So, what do we know about microplastics in our environment? Well, back in 1997, Charles Moore came and visited the company I was working for at the time, and he was concerned because of all this plastic that he was finding when he was coming back from Hawaii, out in the middle of the ocean, and he wanted to do something about it. So we helped him design a survey to look at the North Pacific Gyre, or a lot of people know it by the Great Pacific Garbage Patch. And what we discovered was that there was about 6 to 1 ratio of plastics to plankton by weight, okay? To give you a little bit of an idea about how hard it was to sample this area back in 1999, this is the North Pacific Gyre. And at the time, the modeling that we had told us that this is where the center of the gyre would be. So here's the samples that Charlie and his crew took off the Algeta, and this is actually where the high was. And this is where he found the 6 to 1 ratio. He wasn't even in the area with the most trash. I will let you know that he's gone out there many, many times since 1999, the most recent in 2019. We have students coming into our lab. This was a study primarily supported and funded by Algalita, our sister organization. We have students coming into the lab right now that are working up these samples, the 2019 samples, and they're pretty incredible, the amount of plastics that you see in them. Our hope is to, sometime this year or next year, work up the data and produce a paper with 20 years of monitoring in this area, one of the first papers of its type. This is a study that was done in the Bay Area by the San Francisco Estuary Institute. You may have heard of it. It's had a lot of press about it. The findings were pretty amazing. It was a great study. And they looked at things like stormwater. They looked at what was in the bay itself. They looked at wastewater. And what they found was basically stormwater was the major input into the ocean environment. And primarily through fibers. So fibers from our clothing, synthetic fibers from our clothing, and fragments. And you can see the picture down in the corner here. Those are actual those actual unknown, potentially rubber fragments, and they're pretty sure those are from tire wear. And you can see that we've got people already trying to come up with solutions to keeping the rubber fragments from coming off of the tires and going into the environment. So we'll see where that kind of stuff goes. This was a big study again showing that basically they estimated that 7 trillion microplastics per year were being discharged into San Francisco Bay. That's 7 trillion microplastics per year into San Francisco Bay via stormwater. It was a big, big study. And they're doing some more great work up there in the Bay Area as well. One of the other projects I worked on was back in 2013, where we surveyed sediment throughout Southern California. And while they were surveying the sediment for other things like what types of critters were they finding in the mud, the taxonomists actually agreed to pull out the microplastics and give them to us to analyze. And so we did that. And what we found is if you went offshore anywhere and did a grab, sent this big grab down, and took a grab of sediment, you had basically a 35% chance of finding a piece of plastic, at least one piece of plastic in that grab. If you were in a port or marina, like San Diego Bay, big port down there, LA Harbor, Long Beach Harbor, and you sent this down, you had more than an 80% chance of finding at least one piece of plastic in that grab. Pretty amazing numbers. So we know that microplastics are occurring everywhere. We know they're in our aquatic environments, they're in our air. But what impact are they having on animals? We know that they've been finding microplastics in seabirds and other animals for a very long time. Paper just came out. This paper was just sent to me yesterday. Very distressing paper, basically where they were looking at birds. And we always knew that the microplastics were probably impacting the birds. We've seen those pictures of dead birds on Midway Island, and their guts were full with plastics. This is actually showing, this study actually showed some scar tissue in their stomachs because of plastics. And they've come up with a new term called plasticosis, and basically it's them ingesting the plastic and doing damage to their body because of the ingestion. So we know it's impacting the animals. We're starting to get a lot of different studies that are coming out showing the direct impacts on these animals. Well, is it impacting humans? We're breathing it in. We're drinking it. This is a study that shows that there have been fibers found, plastic fibers found in drinking water. There's other studies, I could have listed a whole bunch of them, where they've actually tested beer, found microplastics in beer. They've tested milk. They've tested all kinds of food products. We find microplastics in particular in bottled water. Bottled water is a fairly big culprit as far as microplastics go, because when you tear the cap off, it basically rips that plastic, and you get microplastics in your water from that. Something to think about. So we know that we're consuming this. We're breathing it in. We know it's getting into our bodies. They have found basically microplastics in human placentas. So we know that the potential for translocation and transference from the mother to the fetus is likely happening. And the next thing we want to do is we want to find out what direct impacts these plastics are having on humans. Because we don't see a really big impact, but that doesn't mean that at the molecular level or the cellular level that something else isn't going on within our bodies. We know about plastics a number of things. We know that they transport pollutants that they come in contact with in the environment, such as PCPs and DDTs. Those adsorb to the plastic particles, and they get transported. Animals may eat them, and then they're exposed to those types of chemicals. We know that they have, in some cases, they used to have a lot of times had bisphenol A, which basically can impact or mimics estrogen within our body. Phthalates, which are endocrine disruptors that are used as a plasticizer and mixed in when they're making putting the plastics together. There's a lot of different things that could impact us, and that's what we need to look at next. So there's been a lot of things done with, again, policy against larger trash. We know that microplastics are becoming a problem, and I'm always proud to be from California, and I oftentimes get calls because I'll get calls from people asking me, what are you guys doing in California? Because you're always ahead of everybody else in policy and what you're doing to help the environment. And sure enough, back in 2018, there was a Senate bill, 1422, that was passed. And basically it required the State Water Resources Control Board to do a number of things around microplastics in drinking water. The first thing that they needed to do was come up with a definition, and I'll show you that in just a minute. You would think coming up with a definition would be extremely easy, but it typically is not, because everybody's got their own definition. Come up with standardized methods, accredit laboratories for analyzing microplastics in drinking water, develop threshold levels for health, and do 4 years of testing. They've already, as I said, defined microplastics. They've had some work done on the standardized method and produced standardized methods for it, and I'll give you a little bit direct description of each of those. So this is the definition of microplastics, and it still lists 5 millimeters or 5,000 microns as the cutoff in size, so anything smaller than that. But you can see, I wanted to include this little footnote here, because even the state recognizes that we still don't know what we need to know about exposure of humans to microplastics, and a lot of work still needs to be done. And the definition may change based on future findings for microplastics in drinking water. So they've defined microplastics. The place where I work now, the Moore Institute, we actually participated in an intercalibration study that was funded by the State Water Board. This intercalibration study, basically we had 30 labs from all over the world participate and work up samples that were spiked with microplastics, so they knew how many microplastics were in each sample. And we basically did 4 types of samples: clean water, dirty water, which basically simulated stormwater, fish tissue, and sediment. And they came up with methods for drinking water, standardized methods for drinking water that they've recommended and published on the State Water Board website. Okay? So a lot of things going on with microplastics. And in 2020, as the world was shutting down because of COVID, I got a phone call. I had just recently left my previous job of 25 years and wanted to make an impact on students and on people. And I got a phone call from Charles Moore, who had been talking with Katie Allen, from the executive director from Algalita. And what they wanted to do was start a new nonprofit, have Algalita focus still on education, but start a new nonprofit to focus on research. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about that, and then I'll finish up pretty quickly. So our new nonprofit, the Moore Institute for Plastic Pollution Research, is focused on bringing to light the problems of microplastics in our biosphere. What are some of the things we did? Well, in 2020, we applied for and became an official nonprofit. We built an awesome staff, many of whom are here today. We've got Charles Moore in the audience. Charlie, can you raise your hand over there? Down here on the lower level. Jennifer Burney. Jennifer Burney actually is staff here at the Aquarium. She works here full time. And she on her days off, works for the Moore Institute. She leads up a whole bunch of things. She along with one of our other staff members, leads our volunteers in getting our samples done for the 2019 Gyre survey. Jennifer's also in charge of our social media and does a wonderful job at that. Jennifer, can you raise your hand down here in the bottom row? Lindsay Darjani. I know Lindsay's here because I saw her. She's up there. She is actually teaching faculty at Cal State Long Beach, teaches marine biology, and she specializes in studying microbes, and now she's specializing in studying microplastics. Gwen Latin, I saw Gwen somewhere. She's over here. Great in the lab, developed a new technique for surveying tap water, lots of experience, lots of knowledge. And then Wynn Calgar couldn't make it today. He is a freshly minted PhD from UC Riverside, and he's off hiking the Pacific Crest Trail and doing one of the very first surveys of trash on the Pacific Crest Trail. Really busy, and we have more than 100 years of research experience in our staff alone, so we've built a really great staff. Early on, we had an angel investor who really liked what we were doing, liked our research focus, and they provided us with some really slick instrumentation. McPike Zima Foundation has provided us with something called a Fourier Transform Infrared Spectrometer, or an FTIR. And that machine is basically used in forensics, and we use it to see what microparticle is made out of. We can tell you what polymers make up the microparticle, and it's our hope that we could get good enough at doing that that we can actually tell you what the majority of the microplastics are made from, and potentially eventually get to a point where we can source some of that stuff. We have some high-end microscopes with an automated stage that basically takes pictures at any magnification, stitches all those pictures together. You can see the stitched picture in the lower left-hand corner. So we can do some automated machine learning to count microplastics and identify the shapes and types and provide measurements on those. One of the things that happens with microplastics is that it's very time intensive. If you've got thousands of microplastics, if you have to touch each one of those and measure it and count it, it becomes a very long process. The other thing that we're working on at the Moore Institute is we are going to be one of the first, if not the first, lab accredited for microplastics here in California in drinking water. And we will certainly be the first nonprofit ever accredited as well. We're working on a lot of paperwork that goes along with accreditation right now, and we are looking to bring in those accreditors to test us in just a little while. Some of our other products include developing software to analyze the spectra that come out of the FTIR. Right now, that machine, that fancy machine I showed you, if you want to have a library for that machine, it usually runs you at least $10,000. Wynn Calgar, our other staff member who is in here today, has been working on this open source software, and people from all over the world are contributing spectra to this, and people can use it from anywhere, and they put their spectra in there, and it tells them what that spectra represents, what polymer it represents. We also have an image explorer that has been developed, and this is taking microplastics pictures from all over the world. We have people contributing from a whole bunch of places. All these pictures, so if you have a microplastic and you want to know basically what matches it in this database, you can go looking, you can sort based on color, you can sort based on shape, you can sort based on polymer type, all kinds of different things. One of the biggest projects we have right now is we are developing a data portal. We were funded by the Possibility Lab and California 100 out of UC Berkeley to develop a data portal for microplastics. The State Water Board is going to require the drinking water facilities to submit data through this data portal. We have partners in San Francisco Bay, the San Francisco Estuary Institute working on this with us, as well as UC Berkeley, and we actually have some students from Cal State Long Beach working on part of this project as well. The other thing we're working on is something called trash taxonomy. You would think that we have all these trash studies throughout the world going on, that we'd be able to compare data from Southern California, for instance, to Northern California. But that's not the case because everybody calls things different. by different names. So we might call plastic bottles down here plastic bottles. They might just call them bottles up in the Bay Area or in somewhere else in the world. This basically allows us to crosswalk all those names and be able to compare the data and come up with regional assessments of trash based on this. One of our other goals is to help students out. Many students studying microplastics right now don't have access to this kind of equipment, so we've had students from Cal State Humboldt up in Northern California. A student came down to use our equipment during Christmas time for a week. We have students from Cal Poly San Luis Obispo looking at microplastics in agricultural fields. We have a student from Cal State Long Beach looking at weathering of different types of microplastics and using our machine as well. We've had students from Pasadena City College, and we had a student, actually a high school student, come up and use our equipment to do a science fair project, and he did really well in the project. So that's kind of what our mission is and some of the projects we're working on. Most recently, we partnered up with Algalita, and Algalita is focusing on education. We're focusing on research, but what we really want to do is we want to put all this together and have a single place where people can go and interact with each other around plastic pollution, both education and research. So we actually secured a facility here in Long Beach. It's down between Ballast Point and Mulaney's in Alamitos Bay. It's about 2,000 square feet. This is what it looks like. We're going to have a classroom, a technology lab where we have kind of we want to have a virtual reality a lab in there and do some metaverse work. We've got a lab viewing area so students can come out of the classroom. There's a big window that looks into the lab, and they can look to see what the scientists are doing in the lab and interact with them. We've got a conference area, a social lounge. It's really the kitchen, but I call it the social lounge. The lab itself, we have a special room for our equipment, our FTIR. We have basically a sampling process, a sample processing area, and a microscope room. We've got some offices and other things, but this whole side of the building has to be kept very clean. Contamination is a big deal in microplastics, so everybody on this side of the building has to wear cotton clothes, and then they can wear whatever on the other side. All right. So I'll end, I've got 2 more slides. I'll end by saying that if we continue doing what we're doing, business as usual, we will continue to exponentially increase the amount of plastic we have polluting the earth. We've really got to put some effort into bringing down the number of plastic, the amounts of plastic that we're using to better levels, and we're just not doing that right now. So I usually like to end my presentation with recommendations on what you can do to help, and here are a few suggestions. Reduce the amount of plastics that you're using. If you know you're going to go to a place and you're going to have leftovers, there's nothing wrong with taking your own container. Okay? If you know a place that you want to go to has plastic containers that they give you the food in, and you don't want to contribute to the plastic problem, don't go to that place. Vote with your wallet. I tell my students that all the time. If you purchase something over and over again, they're going to keep making it. If you stop purchasing it, they'll stop making it. Use local refill resources. Right next to our lab, associated with Algalita, we have BYO Long Beach. You can go there. They have containers. You can refill. You can your shampoos, your lotions, your laundry soap, all kinds of different solutions you can find at this store, as well as Ethically, which is also in Long Beach. So there's some options for you. And with that, I'll thank you for attending, and I'll end my presentation here.
Raise your hand if you want a mic, and we'll run them up to you. Get your questions. While you're waiting for that, I have a question.
Sure.
So what about, you mentioned the data and the research on impact on birds and other animals and on humans. one of that deals with nanoplastics. The
Yeah.
really, really tiny ones that can get in your cells. Most of it is not nanoplastics, right?
It's not nanoplastics at this point. Nanoplastics are really hard to analyze. You think doing microplastics is hard and time consuming. It's even more so with nanoplastics. And we're actually, there are people out in the world right now developing new technology to be able to analyze those. I know there's a person down at a lab at CSU San Marcos who is working on technology to look at nanoplastics. But you're right, even with the drinking water policy here in California, it's only dealing with things larger than 50 microns, which is in microplastics realm is not as small as we should be able to get to. Yeah.
Hi, my name is Val,
Hi, Val.
and I'm impressed with the research that has been done, especially in the use of drinking water. And you mentioned that bottled water has more microplastics in it than the tap water that we receive, well, from our water department. So would you suggest that we drink more tap water?
Yeah, I would. There's filtration systems you can buy for tap water. It's anything you can do to decrease the plastic bottles that you are using. It's interesting because we were entering a 4-year period of studying drinking water, tap water, and the feeling I'm getting from people is we're not going to find a lot in the tap water. We're actually going to find more in bottled water, which has no policies and is not required necessarily to be tested. We did at the Moore Institute have a bottle company come visit us because they know that it's going to be potentially something that they're going to get nailed for. So they're starting to think about it, and yeah, it's a big issue. Where are we at?
Shelly. My question is, first of all, thank you for, I think, a very enlightening presentation. With all this technology and all of this explosion exponentially of plastics, it used to be the assumption that once a plastic was created, it was almost here forever. Have there been any research in terms of this high technologies or something to sort of dissolve them sustainably in this field, or are we stuck with plastics forever? How is it actually ever removed safely from the environment?
Yeah, so we're contacted quite a bit by different companies that are trying to find the solution for replacing plastics with products that will degrade much quicker. The problem is there's standards that they have to follow, and usually they have to be able to degrade in the marine environment. Well, we have a wide variety of marine environments. We have the depths of the ocean, which are really cold and dark, and there's not going to be a lot of degradation down there. So what is the standard that we're going to use for that degradation? We're not sure yet. But there are a lot of companies working on it. We get contacted all the time. We actually have been working with a fabric company that provides uniforms to a lot of different companies, and they're developing a fiber that will degrade much quicker than just regular synthetic fibers. They've got an additive to it that helps it degrade. So it's going to continue to be a problem, and until somebody finds that magic bullet that will degrade faster, then it will still be around. I was talking to somebody earlier, and I'm of the age where I remember having a milkman deliver milk to my front porch in glass bottles. And, you don't see that nowadays. I really like to see us go back to doing some more of that kind of stuff rather than keep trying to find solutions to the plastic.
Thank you for this presentation. It's been really enlightening in a sad way. But my question is, my son said in Boston, they have something in the rivers called a trash wheel to stop all that trash getting into the Boston Harbor. And I wrote to a council member here years ago asking if we could do the same thing in the LA River to prevent things from even getting into our oceans to help stop it or slow it. Have you had any success or heard of any success to this regard?
So there's always issues with those kinds of things. There have been other things that have been developed. A lot of times when you're collecting the trash from the waterways, you're also damaging, potentially damaging the ecosystem because you've got other organisms that are getting caught by those systems as well. We do have, the Ocean Cleanup has a boat right now in Ballona Creek. It's got some booms that collect trash as it's coming down Ballona Creek, and they collect it into bins on the boat. The big problem with that is during large rainstorms, which we tend to have when we do have rain, it's not going to be truly very effective, and it doesn't get the stuff that's either neutrally buoyant or on the bottom. So there's still a lot of work to be done. But at least they're focusing more on sources now instead of trying to clean a bigger area out in the middle of the ocean up. Yeah.
Hi, I just want to thank you first off for sharing all the information. And I'm wondering if y'all have any suggestions for us as community members to have some sort of movement towards zero waste initiatives, maybe like talking to our city council members, or what we can do to try to push something along through our municipalities.
Yeah, definitely spreading the word, educating yourself so that you can talk to other people. Visit places like BYO Long Beach. They've got a ton of information, and they can certainly help you out. Julie's in the audience today. She's the owner of BYO. Please feel free to ask her questions about that. So there are a lot of things you can do. Become involved in citizen science. There's a lot of volunteer programs are just starting to come back since COVID. I know Algalita has programs where they've got a relationship with the Aqua Bike folks in Alamitos Bay. You can go out and help collect trash and get some exercise at the same time. And just talk to everybody, share the message. I always tell my students that you really shouldn't trust what people tell you. Go find out the real information and share that with others. Because the amount of information, misleading information that we get oftentimes just doesn't get questioned enough. So yeah, talk to your council members. I know Charlie has talked to the mayor of Long Beach a number of times. Just get the message out there, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for your presentation. It's been awesome. I was wondering what impact that the federal, state, city, and local developers have on delivering water through plastic pipes to our homes. I was talking to a colleague of mine. I teach at Santa Ana College, and one of the chemistry instructors was mentioning how she just had her house repiped, and all the pipes were plastic, and I didn't know that that's what was happening. I would love to use something like what Gwen has developed. We developed a tool called the tap trap, which basically hooks up to a faucet. It's got either a 5 micron or a 20 micron filter. You can send a known amount, because it's got a flow meter on it, known amount of water through it, and the filter captures whatever plastics might be in the water. I would love to do a study on plastic pipes to see what that is. I haven't seen anything out there in the literature. Good question.
I remember that, so you're a scientist, right?
Yep.
And I remember that when I grow up, I just want to be a scientist.
Awesome.
I don't know what I want to do,
Awesome.
but I don't know.
Don't be afraid to talk to us. Talk to us all the time. Ask us questions. There's a lot of stuff we can talk about.
Even I could teach you about this thing that whales gobble up water, and suddenly they just spray it out, and then their mouths are fine. So they like gobble a body of water up.
The whales are pretty incredible.
I don't know why do they do that, but it's weird.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Over here. Let me wrap it up.
Right.
So you do science proud. You know, one of the reasons I'm a scientist too, and she's obviously making a difference, and your whole institution is. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
I just want to say that when you exit, you can exit down here. You go out the way you came in, and there's beverages, and there's a special project, and I don't even know the words to describe it. You just have to figure it out. It's a puzzle. And I do want to mention two other things. There is a researcher in the Bay Area. I think that the future for dealing with plastics is a lot of the ways it's broken down now is with heat, which is really high temperatures, which is incredibly energy intensive. It doesn't work. There's a young woman who she's won a Rolex award a couple of years ago for a young scientist, and she's using chemistry to try to reconstitute the plastic and then into ingredients that can be sold so it's profitable to be used in other products. And I think that's the future because it's not going to be so energy intensive and it'll be economical. The other thing I want to encourage you to do is I hope your visitors and guests from your institute will linger around a little outside, and you should have some conversation about this. And check out on the web, search Global Plastic Watch. I don't know, have you seen the Global Plastic Watch? Go Google search Global Plastic Watch. It's an interactive dynamic map, and it uses machine learning to view landfills all over the world and find out where the plastic in the ocean is coming from. It's a really good educational tool. It's got beautiful stories in it about what happens, and it actually sort of targets criminal behavior. So on that note of criminal behavior, go outside and have a conversation. Oh, I forgot, next week, I should have had my notes, Adina, I'm sorry. Next month, the first Wednesday is going to be about, I don't know how to say this, I would call it gardening. But gardening is not just gardening, just like when you come to the aquarium and view animals, it makes you happier, your cognitive function improves. Gardening does the same thing. So we'll hear a little bit about that. So thanks a lot for showing up.